Hey guys, what a beautiful day it is here in paradise at Red Mesa in New Mexico. I just finished pouring the concrete, and there's also some wood flooring and some concrete mix. You'll see what I'm saying. I'll show it to you when it dries. And it's a beautiful day. It's sunny. It isn't raining, or there's no clouds that I can see anywhere. And so I've got a good chance to sit down here and talk a little bit more, because even with all that we have talked about, and we've been talking quite a while about this now for several videos, and maybe some of you getting bored with this, but don't get bored, because this is the mystery that we need to solve. And we can establish that because when they destroyed the temple of Alexandria and burned down the library, you have no idea just what they did. And they did it on purpose. Because all the knowledge of the ancient pre-flood days, the knowledge of Atlantis, and all the ancient wisdom, and all the truth was taken from the earth. The apostasy had been complete, although it took another almost over 1,500 years for them to destroy the real sanctuary, which is the heart of man, which is happening right now. When you see the children running around, dancing and twerking and, twitching their rears and everything, night and day, like they're not even ashamed. Everybody's mutilating their bodies, and the demons are entering the children, and the great apostasy has become full swing. Now that should startle and shock and frighten in a horrific way everybody that's on this earth. And I do believe that there's a number of people that are shocked in the world today, frightened, and many of them are losing their faith. But understand, this is exactly what Jesus said would happen. He said, when you see these things, look up. Your deliverance is near. He said, don't tire out. Endure unto the end. Why? Because you're going to get your reward, guys. Oh, the reward is worth it. We're going to go to paradise, and we're going to sit on thrones, and we're going to have dominion over the earth. We're going to guide them to waters of life. We're going to teach the ignorant and judge the angels that have sinned. And with our Lord and Savior, we're going to bring peace and safety and security and eternal happiness to the world. And it's about to happen. Please, friends, hang on. And while we're hanging on, let's understand what's going on. Let's understand what's happened. The mystery of all things is wrapped up in a man named Jesus Christ. And that was only 2,000 years ago. And there's some kind of a mystery that happened. He died. And he was wrapped in some kind of mummification, stuck in a tomb. A specific 3 days went by, and Mary came out with spices and did all this stuff. And then 3 days later, and they rolled the stone, and it was on the first day of the week. And we're like, oh, well, this is just a story. We have been showing that the story has been hidden. All you've got now is the Bible with 66 books. That means it's not complete. They've taken away. By the way, Joseph Smith, I keep mentioning him. A lot of you are probably saying, oh, I like everything you're saying, Dave, but what's this thing about Joseph Smith? Get over it. Right? Who is he? Friends, this man will be shown in coming years to be one of the greatest prophets that ever lived, and the prophet of our day. And when the things that he spoke are brought to light, you will marvel. But one of the things he did was bring back the priesthood. You say, well, we had that with the Catholic Church. No, it's become apostate. A lot of you are saying, oh, yeah, I'm a Catholic, and you're letting everybody realize that the Pope is important. Yeah, he was important. Indispensable. Part of the great mystery, but you don't know the answer to the mystery. You haven't got the revelation. The revelation is that great priesthood had to be usurped, infiltrated by the evil one. And as we've said before, the great high priesthood didn't exist in the world until Joseph Smith. They were all running around doing something they had no idea what they were doing, still going by this law of carnal commandments and condemning everybody to hell. Just hypocrites. The apostasy had set in so deep, and the ones that we thought were protesting against apostasy, like Luther and Zwingli and all of these, Calvin and these guys, were maybe more apostate than any of the popes ever were. Yes, it is by faith alone that we're saved. But to dismiss the holy rite, our celebration of life, the communion, and the great love feast, and not to understand any of that anymore, and to just, and now we've come to the point where it's like, you don't need to gather together in his name. You don't need to believe in the Lord Jesus. He wasn't even a real person. And, and the teachers now, YouTube teachers, there's nothing wrong with YouTube. We're doing it here too. However the Lord wants us to teach is fine, but they're not teachers. They revel in the fact that they're not scholars. Great. But let's at least be filled with the Holy Spirit. That would be the only prerequisite, that you have the Holy Spirit. And you can't have the Holy Spirit if you don't believe in the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Then these three are one. And if you've forgotten your mother, then what do you have? She has all the wisdom. And only she can teach you. And in the hour in which you need to know it. So the apostasy happened when they destroyed the temple at Alexandria and burned it to the ground. Now, I don't believe that all of those books were lost. I think the priests were very wise and took them underground into the labyrinth. Maybe there is somebody on the earth today who knows about this and is guarding it. I don't know. I think it's been covered over, and I think by the divine angel's providence, they're guarding it themselves, the angels, and not humans. There is a theory going around that all that treasure was taken literally to America and is down in the Grand Canyon. And our government has made guards and so forth, and you're not allowed to go in there. They made it a park. Everywhere there's these holy sites, they make them a military site or some kind of a park, and they got rangers, and it's all protected or watched, and you can't go in. Now, I don't know if all of those ancient treasures are at the Grand Canyon, but I do know firsthand, because the Lord took me there, that there is a mountain in New Mexico, not more than, I don't know, not too many miles from where I live here today, less than 100 miles, I think it might be like 50 miles, but there's a mountain that looks like Mount Horeb or something, and the Lord led me there and gave me an oracle stone, an ancient stone that was used to communicate with the divine being. And he gave that to me as a gift. And he has told me that I need to speak the things that he teaches me to others. So I know that here in this state of New Mexico, the traditions have been going for at least over 500 years, that the county where I live now in New Mexico, which is Cibola County, well, it was written Cibola, or Cebola. It's the Spanish translation of a word that is one of the words that the native Pueblos used to use. It's Jauja ruins, conquered by Francisco Coronado. This was one of the 7 cities of gold that you've probably heard about, and there is a legend there that the Spanish tell about this Jauja, and that's right near where I am at right now. Zuni Indians are probably, their reservation's like 20 miles from me, or 10, I don't know. It's right here. I think it might be like 1 mile. It's right next to my property, the Zuni Indian. And there's a Zuni Cibola complex, and that's where the ruins of this Jauja ruins is, and that's supposed to be one of the 7 cities of gold that Coronado was trying to find, because, you know, they were just greedy, and they were trying to take it back to Spain, the Queen Isidora or something, and perhaps he'd share it with her or something. But they cared. I don't know if that they really were looking for gold or for the truth, because the 7 cities of gold, and remember, so there's 7 of them. And this is just one of the 7 cities. One of them could be at the Grand Canyon. I do believe that this particular area where I'm at, there might be several more cities in any range of area around here. But I'm actually living practically at the base of one of them. And so I think the protectors of the Holy Grail and the Holy Textus Receptus, I think they did their job. And now these books are coming to light from the dust, and they whisper from the ground. But Joseph Smith brought back what he called a seer, a diviner. And people in Christianity were like, oh, blasphemy, oh, it's terrible, he's a pagan. No, he's just bringing back the Melchizedek priesthood, the higher order. And he did not teach that you must receive it from a man. But go look at the Pearl of Price and look at the Book of Abraham, and you look at the circular seal that portrays Abraham in Egypt and the Pharaoh. And read down the interpretation. He only gives you a small part of the interpretation, because much of it is just too much for the world to even handle in 1830. But one thing he did say is that if anybody can interpret these things, then the power that gave them that revelation was from the divine being, and nothing can stop them from entering into the heavens, because there is a series of things a lot of people think this is all magic and ridiculousness, that you've got certain, like realms you've got to go through. There's regions above and regions below, and you go into the lower regions of the earth, which is hell. Jesus went through all the regions of hell. What does that mean? He was incarnated and went through all the stages that every other person went through, partook of flesh and blood as did his brethren, and became man, very man. And as man, he ascended and went all the way down. What is it that he ascended, but also that he descended? He became, yes, Jesus at one time went through all the various things, like being animals and going through the stages of incarnation, transmigration, from glory into glory, even as done by the Lord. And then he's ascending now, he's ascending far above all principalities, powers, and dominions. And Christianity has no clue what any of that means. But all of that information, his mummification and the funerary rites, which we have in the book of Psalms, a body hast thou prepared for me, Psalms 22. And they drew lots over his garments and all of these things that happened. And I shall declare thy name in the great congregation. All of this in the book of Psalms is exactly the works that we find that was given to us by Solomon, Moses, Joseph, Amenhotep, the Pharaoh of Egypt, and Osiris and Horus, and the empty tomb in the Great Pyramid, which we're going to show today, was part of Heliopolis itself. Heliopolis was huge, miles wide. And the mountain that Abraham stood on was the Great Pyramid itself. And many of the things that I've been telling you over the past, little by little, dropping little things, for the past, I don't know how many years, we're going to read in a single few paragraphs here in just a moment so that you can understand the truth of what we're now beginning to realize. But that priesthood that was at Alexandria and all the library there was transferred to that location. It had been originally at Heliopolis and probably extended all the way to the pyramids at Morris, Lake Morris, which is a man-made lake that they built. They diverted the Nile to go around the pyramid. Now, the fact that there were so many fathoms deep, like 200 feet deep, the pyramid went underground, is really probably telling us that there was many mazes and labyrinths of caves and tunnels and rooms in a city underneath Heliopolis that was probably as vast as the city up above. And that still remains. And I believe it's all still down there. And the Egyptians probably have no access to it themselves. Because somebody, whoever the angelic hosts are that have rule over that and protect it, they will not allow man to have that information at this time. So, really what I guess I'm trying to say is that I want you to be encouraged, and I want you to understand that we're not just singing Dixie here, not even whistling it. This is the truth. And I know some of you are a little leery, and you're like, well, I want to wait and reserve judgment, Dave, until you lay it on us and give us all the information, then I'm going to analyze this and see it, because it makes a lot of sense. I'm sure most of you who've been hardcore Christians for years, and that's good. You stuck with the bare knuckle truth, and you said Jesus only, and you never apostated, and that's so good. But what you don't understand is that this mystery isn't just some out of the blue, right? Jesus comes along and, oh, who is this? And he died for your sins, and now you better accept him or you're going to go to hell and burn. That's not the truth. That's the part of this that it's the mystery of it all hasn't been yet revealed. This goes all with, if it isn't something that is historically tied to Adam, Enoch, and before the flood, the great patriarchs and these magnificent temples. What is this Serapis Christ thing for 200-300 years that they practiced in Egypt? What does it have to do with Jesus? Why were they doing the cross buns and the thing on Sunday? And why did they have the mummification of the pharaohs and they would go in and be resurrected? What does this have to do with Jesus? And why are all these priestesses, Canaanite priestesses, that give birth to the seed? Like Naamah, or Rahab the harlot, who was a Canaanite, from Jericho, no less. When they went into the promised land, and she married Joshua. Well, that's interesting because Joshua is a forerunner of Jesus. And why did Judah marry a Canaanite priestess, Tamar? And why did Solomon have all of these wives? And David. David had 700 wives. He married all the king's daughters and made the whole world one big family. And why did the church, the Christian church, become the holder of the great priesthood? The Rex Sacrorum and the Pontifex Maximus becomes something that Christians do, and now we're all like, oh, it's blasphemy, and what's going on? Why is it nobody knows? Why has Christianity come down to just, well, believe whatever you want, there's no Jesus. And that's the true Christianity. Freedom from all. You look at these people strutting around with bikinis, twerking on YouTube, and this has become Christianity? Liberalism. Well, now let's see. I don't really believe in the Bible, but I'm a Christian. Huh? Well, you can't make heads and tails out of the Bible. And I don't blame you for being confused. But what I do blame is the devil, who has perpetrated this evil on the world and has confused and deceived the entire world, and nobody wants to get to the bottom of this. So this is why we need individuals like Remember, in the days of Elijah, the people didn't know what to do. They were out worshiping Baal. How? They don't know. So Elijah comes along and says, what are you doing? Well, we don't know what to do. Well, so Elijah said, okay, let's go up to the mountain and we'll find out. What did Buddha do? His religion had become apostate. His daddy was a king, but he was a very wealthy man, and he gave up all the wealth and sat in a spot with his legs crossed until he could find the truth. He says, I'm not going to become the ruler of the world in this crazy, evil system. I want the truth. Look at Krishnamurti. They said he was going to be the world teacher, the world prophet, the Christ. What did he do? He said, you know what? They sent him to all the schools and he learned all the great wisdom, but he said, you know what? I don't want to be above others. I'll tell you the truth. I'm not supporting any of these apostate religions. You need to go to the Lord yourself. You have access to the Father. And he taught the truth. Well, we don't want to hear the truth. So the mystery is important, and we ought to be able to understand it. There's a broken chain of revelation and truth and history. They've covered over this place called Heliopolis, and I want to share with you a little about Heliopolis. And after we do that, we're going to find some more information. We're going to put some more information together that we haven't been even paying any attention to prove that Jesus Christ was truly the Rex Sacrorum and he truly was the Son of Deity, the Savior of the world. So let's take a look at this. This is Heliopolis, Egypt's radiance. Heliopolis was ancient Egypt's most magnificent temple. Today, nothing remains. Its stones dispersed over various buildings of medieval Cairo. Equally, its true importance lies scattered in various ancient accounts from Diodorus, Siculus, Plato, and many others. It is said that those who fly too close to the sun get burned. In case of the priests of Heliopolis, it is reported that all of the temples of ancient Egypt, theirs was the most magnificent, that their temple had a floor that was so perfect that one could see the night sky reflected upon it. Alas, of its temple, nothing survives, though it was the home of the mythical Phoenix. Heliopolis, once destroyed, never rose from its ashes to be reborn again. The Phoenix, as we've said, is Enoch, the city of Enoch, friends. The city of Enoch, not the one from Cain, but the true Enoch. Now, remember, Enoch built his city in Mexico, where Mexico City is. But before the great flood occurred, Adam was in this area over there in Egypt. And he probably died there, and we're going to show some evidence for that. The greatest temple of all has totally disappeared. Friends, don't you think we ought to know something about the greatest temple of all? The greatest temple of all. Don't you think we should find out what it's all about? Isn't it odd that they built the Jerusalem sanctuary there and that the last of the Zadokite priesthood officiated there, whose name was Jesus? I think it's important that we investigate this, don't you? It's stones used for the construction of medieval Cairo. But even in the Ptolemaic times, the Greeks used Heliopolis as a quarry to use its stones for the construction of the Pharaoh's lighthouse in the harbor of Alexandria. And that house that they call a lighthouse became the tower and may very well be the Migdal, though it used to be at Heliopolis. It may very well be the Migdal that still stood in the days of Jesus, although there is some indication that the Migdal of Heliopolis still stood in the days of Jesus. But the same religion was transferred, the seat of its authority was transferred from Heliopolis to Alexandria to Rome, and then to probably London and now in Washington, D.C., although I guarantee that the people who are in charge of that temple today are apostate, wicked men. And I'll show you why we know that it was transferred to all those places. But even and of course, that is important. We need to know why. Who are these wicked people running the world with this pyramid on our dollar bill? See, there's something going on here. This is the mystery. If you want to know the mystery, stay tuned. This is the whole thing we need to understand. If you don't understand this, you're never going to understand anything. So they built the lighthouse at Alexandria, or the Migdal, the tower. In Roman times, its obelisks were taken away to adorn Alexandria, and then were sailed across the Mediterranean to Rome, including the famed Cleopatra's Needles that now reside on the Thames Embankment, London, and Central Park, New York. You see, why did they take Cleopatra's Needles, or the obelisks, to London and New York? Well, they may be evil, these people, but they ain't stupid. They know that that is the original temple, that anyone who has that priesthood rules the world. And indeed, they do rule the world, but by the power of Satan. Nearly half of the 13 obelisks now in Rome came from Heliopolis, meaning that there is more of Heliopolis in Rome than in Heliopolis itself. But when Cleopatra's Needle was erected in Heliopolis on the orders of Thutmose III around 1450 BC, it was already late in the life of the town, as with so many temples of ancient Egypt. When Heliopolis was born will remain forever shrouded in the mists of time, but we know it's existed from the very first dynasties, with likely origins in pre-dynastic Egypt. Heliopolis, however, was the name the Greeks gave it, and its most modern name, the city's Egyptian name, was Inu, place of pillars. You see, here's where they get you. They lie. Notice what they say, which in Hebrew, or biblical Hebrew, was corrupted as On. Also, the Bible corrupted it. It's not corrupted. Inu is just the pronunciation of that same On from a different language. Why are they saying it was corrupted? Because they wanted you to, it's a technique that they use to poo-poo everything holy, and to make you think that it's just nobody knows and it's corrupted, and so therefore don't listen to it. No, it hasn't been corrupted. The city Egyptian name was On, or Enu, or Anu. Depending on what language you speak, it's the same place. The site, roughly near Cairo Airport, is now known to the Arabs as Ain Shams, the Well of the Sun. The ancient city walls of crude brick are still to be seen in the fields, giving us an idea of the city's dimensions and shape. A trapezium of about 1,200 meters went to the east, and 1,000 meters north to south. The funerary stela of, I can't even pronounce that word, states that the thickness of the walls was 15.6 meters. In comparison, the outer walls of the temple of Amun at Karnak measures 480 by 550 meters, and are less than 12 meters thick. Though only fragments of Heliopolis' city will remain, they were easily discernible at the time of the French expedition, and even in 1898, portions of these walls stood 10 to 12 meters high. Today, of the temple complex itself, only a sole obelisk remains, one of the pair set up by Senusret I, the second king of the 12th dynasty, as well as a few granite blocks bearing the name of Ramesses II. Preservation work on the obelisk occurred in the 1950s when the Antiquity Department gave some attention to Heliopolis. Efforts in the 1970s were done to improve accessibility, but only under Zahi Hawass was Heliopolis been tackled with the respect it is due. Alas, most of the discoveries that have been made date from the Sate period, very late in the history of the temple. Archaeologists have only been able to locate 2 of the 5 known temples that existed. There were 5. They found 2. The Sun Temple itself has never been located. We have no idea how big it was and how magnificent it might have been. With little to no archaeology, Heliopolis is therefore more part of history than Egyptology, and is hence often an unrepresented and underappreciated site. Only in more recent years has some accommodation been made for tourism, but progress is slow. Hence, to properly understand its importance, we need to turn to the pages of history and the accounts of those visitors who visited it when it was still alive. One ancient visitor was Diodorus Siculus, who in 60 BC wrote that Heliopolis was built by Actus, one of the sons of Helios, and Rhode, who named the city after his father. It was also reported that while all Greek cities were destroyed during the flood, the Egyptian cities, including Heliopolis, survived. Friends, did you hear that? Heliopolis existed before the flood. It was really a place where Adam lived at one point. Not at the beginning, when Adam was born. That's not where the garden was. Because after the flood, the entire world took on a different look. Because the waters moved mountains and raised up mountains and made great glens and changed the earth's shape. But after the flood, what remained of Heliopolis became the center for worship. We probably need to take this legend with a grain of desert sand, for it is known that though the sun was important in Heliopolis, the chief deity of Heliopolis was the creator deity Adam, who soon became known as Adam Ra, revealing indeed a link with the solar cult, which was, however, secondary in origin. Adam was the self-begotten creator deity who created the universe through masturbation, seeing he was, after all, totally alone in the universe. Well, understand, Adam was one, and he hadn't been separated in his psyche. He really wasn't either male or female at this point. But in Greek stories and Gnostic teachings, we find that before Adam became Adam and Eve, he was considered the virgin. And so the Egyptians talk about this too, and they call her Neet, as we said, Asenet. But it's very complicated because there's a lot of parables that have yet to be interpreted by the world today. Adam created the so-called Ennead. Now, the Ennead is the 9, and that would be the 9 patriarchs from Adam all the way down to Noah. The group of 9 deities that embodied the creative source and chief forces of the universe. Though the Ennead is quite well known within the alternative field, if only through such books as the Stargate Conspiracy, it is less known within the world at large. Still, the Ennead, the 9 principles through which the pharaoh ruled and ordered the forces of the universe, dominated Egyptian thought from the Old Kingdom onwards. For no less than 3,000 years, it is therefore the longest living theology that ever existed. Adam was worshipped in the site's primary temple, which was known by the names of Per-At, Great House, and Per-Atem. The House of Adam. Another temple in Heliopolis was the Mansion of the Ben-Ben, also known as the Mansion of the Phoenix. So this would be a mansion of Enoch. Now, that doesn't mean that Enoch didn't build the city in Mexico City that's today still called Enochic land. It just means that before the flood, Adam and Enoch had gone over to this area, and probably that's where Enoch was taken up and Adam died. But we'll talk about that another time. And the Mansion of the Phoenix, which is believed to have been a sacred precinct in which in the middle of the open courtyard stood a stone pillar, on top of which sat the Ben-Ben stone. It was seen as the solidified seed of Adam, the stone of creation. And by the way, I believe that stone of creation is called, in our Bible, the stone that was given to Joseph, who got the promise of the multitude, and he shall reign over his brethren, which is of the lineage of King David, because David's father was Jesse, the son of Ephratah, or Ephraim, the son of Joseph. And that stone that the builders rejected has become the chief cornerstone. So it was spiritually, the house of spiritual stones that's being built up for the Lord to inhabit by spirit, was the chief cornerstone, which can only be a pyramidal stone, because the chief corner is only the top corner. In fact, the word chief stone can be translated top stone. So Jesus was the stone that the builders rejected. But it was literally a stone, and it's been transferred. And the Irish talk about Jeremiah bringing with him Tiatifi, the Egyptian priestess, from Aphrodite, up to Ireland with the Red Hands or the Zara line. And they transferred the throne from Ireland to Scotland to England. And they inaugurate and anoint their king, just as King Charles was recently anointed upon that stone. And that, of course, is that stone that you can trace all the way back to this original magical stone. And some have said it was of meteoric origin, but, that's just what some say. There's no proof of that. And it was shining in the sky, but when fallen on the earth, it was black. Alas, the stone itself has had one point in time. No one is quite sure. And by the way, some say that part of the stone is now at Mecca. And this is why the Arabs and the Muslims go there and worship. No one is quite sure when precisely disappeared and is hence impossible to study. It was on this stone that the phoenix, the great rendition of the Egyptian Binu bird, was said to return periodically, whereby he was reborn from his ashes, heralding a new era. Ancient accounts differ as to the number of years that passed between his visits. Some dates apparently linked with a calendar linked to the precession of the equinoxes, others with the stellar calendar dominated by Cyrus. In charge of the religious life of the community was the Heliopolitan priesthood, which is known to have been very influential. This is evidenced in the case of the architect of Zoser step pyramid, Amenhotep, written Amenhotep here. But another way to write that is Imhotep. Hosef is Joseph. And so Joseph was the first of the priests called Hosef. And there were others. A high priest of Heliopolis. As we read in the Bible, Joseph went to Heliopolis and married Shechem's daughter, Asenath. And by the way, that's one way we get an inkling of where Israel was, because Shechem is supposed to be right next to Bethel and Gilgal and Jerusalem in the land of Israel. And yet, here we're shown that Asenath was at Heliopolis, the daughter of Shechem. So if Shechem was the great high priest, or Abimelech, father Lamech, or father Molech, Lamech because Lamech was the father of Naamah, the woman who gave birth to the seed, the Canaanite princess. And remember, one of her names, this princess, is Egyptus, which is where we get the word Egypt. And that's what we call it to this day. So Egypt is from the lineage of Egyptus, which is also Neat, the high deity of the Egyptians, their chief deity. And Heliopolis is their chief temple, the chief place of worship, where Shechem's daughter was. So we can discern from that Israel, the original Israel, around the Jerusalem that they worshipped, was Heliopolis. Uru, Salem, Uru is light, and it was originally Ra in Egyptian tongue, Heliopolis, because Helios, or in Hebrew El, is their way of saying the same thing, or Sol, the sun. The T on Neat being silent, it's Ni, and so it was pronounced Sini, or sun. That's where we get the word sun. All of these words are just different ways of saying the sun, El. So as we said, Shechem, the descendant of Lamech, father Abimelech, made a covenant with Abraham, and then his son, Abraham's son, Isaac, had a son named Jacob. Jacob had 12 sons and one daughter, Dinah, and Dinah was married to Shechem, so that the Canaanite people were wed in union with the children of Abraham. And so that Jacob would be the father of all the nations, Jacob's daughter Dinah had a relations with the Canaanite prince or priest, and they became the descendants of King On there at Heliopolis, or the descendants of El. And Joseph married Asenath. So as we read here, it was probably Joseph who project managed the construction of the first pyramid ever. Egyptologists are in general agreement that the pyramid age came about with and through the rise in power of the Heliopolitan priesthood. Some even note that the shape of the Benben stone might have been similar to the shape of the pyramid. Well, it is. And of course, the Benben today is on the top of the Capitol building in Washington, D.C. And the phallic symbol, or the obelisk of Washington's obelisk, or the Washington Monument, they call it, but it's an obelisk with a little pyramid on top. That's the hands on the clock. And we've talked about that, but we'll skip over that now. There is consensus that the pyramidon, the capstone of the pyramid, did symbolize the Benben stone. However, the connection between the pyramids and Heliopolis is easily demonstrable, as Mark Leonard pointed out that the pyramid of the 5th dynasty at Abusir were aligned to Heliopolis. Dr. Gerard Haney of the Swiss Institute of Archaeology in Cairo has added that the pyramids of Giza aligned to the obelisk of Heliopolis, which replaced the Temple of the Phoenix, where the Benben stone had previously been kept. Furthermore, Giza and Heliopolis were connected by the sacred roads of the gods. The sacred roads is a maze of roads that went all over the area around Heliopolis and the pyramids of Giza. It links Giza directly with Heliopolis, and it is a very important connection. Zoser's pyramid, So, the Heliopolitan creation myth, focused on the self-creator deity Adam, who created the world from the primeval island through the act of masturbation. Where is Adam's primeval hill? Though the Greek geographer Strabo stated that Heliopolis was situated on top of a noteworthy mound, it seems likely that the primordial hill of their mythology was not located in Heliopolis itself, but at Giza. Well, friends, Giza is in Heliopolis, this one mega city. And as I've said many times, when Abraham went up the mountain, it says he was at the River Nile. Well, there are no mountains there. The only mountain that is there is the Great Pyramid, and that's where Abraham went, to the top of the mountain. And he went there at the behest of the Most High, and he said, "Look east, west, north, and south, and all the land you see I will give it to thee. And wherever thy foot treadeth, it shall be yours." Now, west of the Nile is all of Africa. So, the Greek geographer Strabo stated that Heliopolis was situated on top of a noteworthy mound. It seems likely that the primordial hill of their mythology was not located in Heliopolis itself, but at Giza. The strong link between both sides is not only noted by Haney, it was also picked up by Robert Bouval in the Orient Mystery. Quoting, "The Giza group probably represents a symbolic expression of the Heliopolitan myth." Edwards has remarked that the Sphinx was said to guard the splendid place of the beginning of all time, which is, of course, the primeval hill, the mound of creation. As the primeval hill was a place of desert for the creator deity, was the myth of Adam descending to earth related to the Giza plateau. There is an account of how Khufu mentions that an old sycamore tree that grew near the Sphinx was damaged when the Lord of Heaven descended upon the place of Hor-Em-Akhet, the latter translated as the place of the falcon deity, Horus of the horizon, identified with the Sphinx. This tree was linked to Adam, and in Heliopolis there was a chapel to Adam of the sycamore tree. The cult of the sycamore tree was, as usual, worked into Christianity. See the way they say that? It's like, oh, it was worked into it. Like they stole it. Christianity is the benefactor of all of this ancient teaching. The empty tomb is at the Great Pyramid itself, and it was the tomb of Osiris. It became the tree of the Virgin, which is a sycamore that is said to have been planted in 1672 from the shoot of an older tree. According to Coptic Christian tradition, oh, but that's not real Christians, Dave. They're a bunch of Egyptians. That's not the true. Yes, it is. This is the ancient Christian church that was down in Egypt for 200 years before Christ ever died. Because there is more than just the Son that we worship. We worship the Father and the Mother as well. It's called the Holy Trinity. The apostasy is not the Catholic Church would originally proclaim these truths. Well, yes, it's apostate now. But the biggest apostasy just keeps coming. And today we're running around jerking on YouTube. That's the apostasy. But it began with the denial of these sacred truths and the sacred priesthood. So, according to Coptic Christian tradition, the Holy Family, on their journey through Egypt, rested beneath this tree after crossing the desert, and today it remains a place of pilgrimage. Oh, but that's just pagan, Dave. This suggests that Giza and Heliopolis were two aspects of the cult of the creator deity Adam, and that the sacred precinct of Heliopolis did not stop at the temple walls, but extended to the Giza plateau, if not further afield. Edward also believed that the primeval hill was the Giza plateau, or that mountain that Abraham stood on was the Giza pyramid itself. He thus stepped in the footsteps of Diodorus Siculus, who wrote that during the construction of the Great Pyramid, a cut was made from the Nile, so that the water turned the site into an island. Though archaeologists have often focused on the engineering and practical aspects of diverting the Nile, within a religious framework, the plateau was thus turned into an island, to forcefully portray the creation myth of the primeval hill that rose from the waters of chaos, an event that must have been profound at the time of the flooding of the Nile. Ibn Hosef was not the only ace priest of Heliopolis. According to some scholars, the biblical Moses was a high priest there too. Isn't that interesting? Moses? Oh, yeah. Moses was, a little like Joseph. He was the ruler of all the land of Egypt and learned all the ways of the Egyptians. And he was a priest. And his serpent ate their serpents, their staffs. That staff represented his priesthood, which was greater than the other priests that were down there in Egypt. But he learned it from Egypt and from the mysteries there at the pyramid. Another important priest was Manetho, who in the 3rd century BC was tasked with codifying the Egyptian religion in such manner that it would be comprehensible to the Greeks that had just conquered Egypt. It makes it clear that of all the priesthoods that were attached to the various temples along the Nile River, those of Heliopolis were regarded as primus inter pares, and historical accounts confirm this conclusion. In 449 to 440 BC, when Herodotus visited and met the priests, he praised them for their wisdom. Plutarch wrote that the priests of the sun at Heliopolis never carry wine into their temples, for they regard it as indecent for those who are devoted to the service of any deity to divulge in the drinking of wine whilst they are under the immediate inspection of the Lord and King. The priests of the outer deities are not so scrupulous in that respect, for they use it, though sparingly. But in 25 BC, when Strabo visited Egypt, he wrote, "At Heliopolis we saw large buildings." So about the time of Jesus, there were large buildings in which the priests lived. So there was a priest community at Heliopolis in the days of Jesus. And it says those priests studied philosophy and astronomy, but there are no longer either such a body or such pursuits. Isn't that an interesting priesthood, that they studied the stars and astronomy and science and math? Though little was left as late as the 4th century AD, another Heliopolitan priest, Ammonius Saccas, taught two Greek philosophers, Plotinus and Origen, who would develop what is now known as Neoplatonism. Perhaps unsurprisingly, the Greek philosopher Plato himself stated that he studied at Heliopolis. It appears that by the 4th century, this is AD, most priests of Heliopolis had actually moved to Alexandria. Okay, so there was in the days of Jesus still a priesthood at Heliopolis. But think about this. This guy went down there and saw it in the days of Jesus, 25 BC, which is exactly when we're saying Jesus should have been alive, where we're saying Jesus was officiating at the temple that Josephus says was built there on the grounds at Heliopolis. So the buildings of the priests had to have been Jewish priests, or should we say priests of Israel of the Melchizedek order. I don't know why they're hiding this from us, But it's impossible because what we read was that there was no other Heliopolis temple. It was restored as the temple of Heliopolis. So if that was considered Heliopolis, and it was, remember, they built the tower, a Migdal, at Jerusalem, there in Egypt. They called the sanctuary to the Lord. And it was called Jerusalem. And it was on the very location that Heliopolis had existed. And they were doing their Melchizedek priesthood there. And this guy goes down there and says this was the Heliopolis priesthood. And we just read Joseph and Asenath, which tells you that that's where the true temple is. Put two and two together, guys. I mean, it's hard for the mind to accept what one knows if everyone is telling him it's not true. But friends, we know that they tried to hide this. So they're just not, it's just like, oh, you can read it. It's there. We know it, but they're just not going to admit it. Will you admit it? Will we finally admit it so that we can have back our history? So that we can know the truth? Well, I hope so. Okay, so there was in the days of Jesus still a priesthood at Heliopolis. But it was moving to Alexandria. And it had been ever since, I mean, they had to keep rebuilding it because Alexander leveled it to the ground. There were others who had leveled Heliopolis before, like 500 BC. So there was a lot of stuff going on there. But they eventually did move it all up to Alexandria and then to Rome. So the new capital, from Ammonius, we learn that Egyptian priests wrote nothing down and passed everything on orally. He also had his students vow absolute secrecy. See, this is where we get the secrecy and the initiation into the rites of the holy priesthood. A loss, at least in the eyes of Ammonius. Both Plotinus and Origen broke this vow and their doctrine, which was more likely close to the true Heliopolitan doctrine, and it was passed down to us. Ammonius fled Alexandria when its pagan temples were attacked by Christian mobs. Friends, these weren't Christians. These were now the Holy Roman Empire that had been infiltrated and apostatized from the original truth of the ancient mysteries. And it's funny that they were actually trying to destroy the very source of their priesthood and the knowledge of Jesus Christ. And most likely they chose to destroy Alexandria and Heliopolis precisely because the devil didn't want that information to you, didn't want you to understand the importance of the great true Jerusalem. But the Christian attack was but the final attack in a long series, begun when the Persians under Cambyses raised Heliopolis in 525 BC. Both to destroy the power of the priests and to take a strategic position for entering into the south of the land. Ammonius was a favorite scholar of the 19th century founder of Theosophy, Helen P. Blavatsky. Now, friends, I keep talking about Blavatsky, and some of you are like, what? You know, I'm a Christian. I don't know about all that New Age. Well, Helena Blavatsky didn't start the New Age movement. That's an infiltration of her teachings. Helena Blavatsky, if we didn't have her, we wouldn't know a lot of this information. Just as Joseph Smith was a true prophet, so was Helena Blavatsky. And she wrote how Ammonius and his followers had labeled themselves as Philalethians, lovers of the truth, and how Ammonius had declared that all moral and practical wisdom was contained in the books of Thoth, of Hermes, Trismegistus. Now remember, I keep saying that Jesus in another incarnation was Enoch. And then I say it was Hermes. Then I say it was Thoth. Well, it was all of them. And so Thoth of Hermes Trismegistus is the same person, but in a different incarnation. And it is with Thoth that we stumble upon another key aspect of the Heliopolitan priesthood, their role in the pyramid text. Remember we talked about the pyramid text yesterday? The funerary rites, which is what we have in the Psalms, the Proverbs, and Ecclesiastes, which are prophecies of the coming of Jesus. They're also ceremonial rites that were done in the temple. And Jesus fulfilled literally what was prophesied in that temple. That priesthood, for centuries, was looking forward to the birth, the death, and the resurrection of Jesus Christ. It is the true priesthood. And it says that these texts adorn the walls of several pyramids and are largely identical. Repetitive sequences of magical utterances to be spoken by the pharaoh during his voyage in the Duat, the Egyptian afterlife, on his way to heaven, where he will meet and become one with the deities, and the creator deity Adam specifically. You see, Jesus' father is Adam, and he is greater than Jesus. And all of this is about Adam and Eve and Jesus, the only begotten Son. Most recently, it was Robert Babel who popularized the notion that this voyage was also depicted in the sky, and it was widely known that the Heliopolitan priesthood was famous for its astronomy as well as mathematics. Some gave them credit as the primary body that was also able to predict the heliacal rising of Sirius, meaning they would have been largely in charge of the religious and civil calendars. They controlled time, or rather were in charge of keeping time, that the temple was a center of astronomical knowledge and was reflected in the title of its high priest, chief of observers, or the greatest seers, a title carried by Iman Hulsef. See, again, Christians don't talk about seers or diviners, and yet that is the primary function of the high priesthood, but it was brought back by Joseph Smith. Writing in Egypt was dedicated to Thoth, the scribes of the deities and the inventor of hieroglyphics, the sacred language. Interestingly, Egyptologist Maspero has stated that King Khufu, the builder of the Great Pyramid of Giza, was apparently looking for the origins of the pyramid texts. You see, I don't really know. I don't think that this King Khufu was actually the builder, but the texts, which according to the Westcar Papyrus were kept inside a flinty chest in the chamber called the Investigation Hall, which was somewhere in Heliopolis. Maspero wrote that the likeness between what was copied in the various pyramid texts suggests that some of their information was directly derived from old written sources, which were in Heliopolis. In Westcar Papyrus, Khufu consults a magician, no doubt a high priest of Heliopolis. A magician? Oh, that's pagan, that's wicked, that's witchcraft. No, the magician is the high priest of the Magi. It wasn't this hocus pocus magician stuff we have today. And of course, Daniel became the head of the Magi. So Jedi, have you heard of the Jedi priests, in Star Wars? Well, here you go. The Jedi asking, what of the report that you know, the number of the Ipwit of the Wint of Thoth? So the Jedi were priests of Thoth. Jedi replies, I know not the number thereof, but I know the place where it is, in a box of flint in a room called Revision in Heliopolis. Maspero's interpretation is just one of several. Others have included keys. Are those the keys that Jesus gave to Peter? I think so. Or the secret chamber of the sanctuary of Thoth. The important aspect is, however, that the builder of the Great Pyramid was searching for information and that this information was held in Heliopolis. Friends, have you ever seen the key, which today looks like a key, and it looks like a cross, but there's a circle on top? That's called the Ankh. And the Ankh is held by the priest Osiris and his son Horus. And it's in the sky. In the spring, you see it coming up early as it begins to get dark, out of the Duat, and it's coming up out of the of hell. It's the resurrection, and it's the keys of the kingdom that Jesus obtained because he went through death, and death and resurrection gives us the keys to eternal life, the keys of death and Hades. We know that Khufu afterwards went into the Per-Ankh, the house of life, but also a library in search for information regarding the number of chambers of Thoth. And though the priests were forbidden to commit things to writing, it is clear that some priests at some time had been allowed to write down their knowledge. And it is likely that it was this library that would later be transferred and or copied to become the famous Library of Alexandria. So when you look at the days of Cleopatra, you see sometimes that she officiated at the temple at Alexandria. We have very little knowledge about what she did. I say she probably did spend time at Alexandria, and it may have been sort of an outpost of that same religion. However, I do believe that many of the priests in Cleopatra's day was still there at Heliopolis. And since the Jerusalem was rebuilt there on the very location at Heliopolis, I believe the true priesthood was Onias or John. And even though we don't have a lot to say on that, because nobody's got any information on that, because all of that was burned in the Temple at Alexandria and Heliopolis. They burned it all, and we don't have some of this information. We're going to have to put a few things together on our own, friends. But I guarantee that John, the true Zadokite priesthood, officiated Heliopolis, and Cleopatra was the high priest. So the books of the library went up in flames. Over the previous centuries, the priest's knowledge and monuments had been transferred, dispersed, largely in efforts to preserve. Heliopolis might have survived the deluge, but its element of destruction was obviously fire, so closely linked with the sun. Just like the night will extinguish the last rays of the sun, so the city of the sun entered into the shadows of history. A new dawn might be on the horizon, but it might merely be a false hope. Perhaps it will never. Perhaps it never will. Perhaps Heliopolis just shone too brilliantly, and its sparks can never be reignited. May our Divine Father forbid this, and may the blessings be upon his holy priesthood. And now, it makes a little bit more sense, doesn't it? If we're willing to believe, or at least pray and seek the Father and the Lord Jesus Christ. I'm going to go ahead and leave it there. We'll do more on this. We've got lots to say about a lot of things. So stay tuned. We'll see you tomorrow. May the Lord bless you. Have a good one.